Since no one really knows what's actually happening with the DCEU timeline right now, I'm just gonna rank every DC movie, period, that I've ever seen. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. So today I got a tier list ranking of every DC live-action movie that I've ever seen. There's a few animated ones that I just didn't want to include on this list. The reason for this video, obviously, is that Blue Beetle just hit theaters. You can check out my review of that linked above and down below. But before I dive into these tier lists, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below your favorite and least favorite DC films of all time. And of course, subscribe and hit that notification bell to help reach my goal of 85,000 subscribers here on the channel. And check out my Patreon link down below for extra content, access to the Discord server, and more. Your support goes a long way over there. But without further ado, let's rank these DC movies. Alright, so the tiers I have today are S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier, and F tier, and there might be some in that F tier and some in that A tier. Well, we'll just have to see what happens. So kickstarting this, we've got Batman vs Superman, the Ultimate Edition. I don't despise this movie. I do think it's pretty bad, though. I'm going to go D tier with BVS. It's got its moments to shine, notably the actual BVS fight, and there are some lines of dialogue that are chillingly good. Plus, it gets Batman right, that brooding, badass Batman. But they underutilize him, and the movie just gets so convoluted near the end with the introduction of Doomsday and Wonder Woman coming into the picture. Lex Luthor's got a grand scheme. There's way too much going on for a movie that should have just been about Batman and Superman. They really fumbled the bag here, and the Ultimate Edition is a step up, but overall, I don't go back to this one all that much. Next, we've got the Justice League, the 2017 cut of Justice League, F tier. That's a bottom tier DCEU movie, and frankly, one of the most unwatchable messes that DC has ever put out. The red glare effect in the final act of that movie blows my mind. That made the final cut. It is such an ugly movie to look at visually, but also it just doesn't make sense. I don't buy into any of the chemistry because it's so early on in all these characters' individual arcs in the DCEU that it felt like they just shoehorned them all into a movie to try and make $1 billion, and it failed miserably. Next, we've got Aquaman, which is getting a second film. Aquaman is a C tier movie. I prefer it over these two for sure, and it does have its entertainment value. I think Jason Momoa does have a lot of charisma in this role, and it has a surprisingly star-studded cast, including Nicole Kidman, Patrick Wilson, the list goes on and on. There's some other big names in there as well. Dolph Lundgren even has a role. Willem Dafoe, so it's a star-studded cast. I adore James Wan as a director, but I feel like this movie takes away his ability to really shine creatively, and it feels more like just a studio output thing than his actual creative mindset at work. I've never been crazy about Aquaman. Again, it has its moments to shine, but it's way too long. The CGI is hit or miss, and I just never cared too much for this one. Haven't gone back to it since I first watched it. But next we got Batman Begins, a Christopher Nolan film, one of his early movies that launched the Dark Knight trilogy. Where's it going? It's going in the A tier, right below S tier. I think this is the weakest of the Dark Knight trilogy. Not a bad movie by any means. Just compared to the other two, I put this one at the bottom of the trilogy. It's a unique twist on a Batman origin story with that Nolan flair as certain events are told out of order, and it just makes me care so much about Bruce Wayne's character. Again, a star-studded cast across the board here. Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, Alfred is played by Michael Caine. I mean, Christian Bale's Batman. This is a fantastic movie. Just shy of S tier for me because that is absolute God tier. I think there's two movies in that trilogy that outdo this one. That's why it falls a little short there overall. Next, we've got Zack Snyder's Justice League, a movie that is sure to get some heat in the comments down below. One of the more divisive films in the entire DC world, and a movie that I find highly overrated. It's a big step up from the 2017 cut of the movie, there's no denying that, and I do think it's probably better than BVS, but I can't go higher than C tier. I'll put it above Aquaman at this very moment in time just because of how I'm feeling, but the movie's over 4 hours long for no valid reason. In fact, the final 45-ish minutes of this movie are just post-credit scenes setting up things that are going nowhere because we're never going to see Zack Snyder's version of DC come to fruition, and frankly, that bogs this movie down. On top of that, there's a whole 2-hour chunk of this movie devoted to almost every individual character, it seems, and there are moments of greatness, obviously, when the Flash runs back in time, and they hint at a lot of what Darkseid could have been, but it's stuff we're never going to actually see, so as great as the chemistry among the team can be, the movie still falls flat to me in the grand scheme of things. It's way too long for its own good, and just never was that rewatchable. Moving on, though, we've got The Batman. If my shirt didn't give it away already, come on, it's going to the top of S tier, and I don't know if it's going to get topped. This is my favorite Batman film. I got the poster right behind me. I have so much to praise for this film. It's a 3-hour detective epic, and it warrants every second of that runtime. Matt Reeves directs it wonderfully. Robert Pattinson is the best performance as Batman, in my opinion. And through, this is like if you took one of those Arkham games, which I adored playing growing up, and you directly brought it to the big screen in this gritty, damn near R-rated Batman film. It works fully. It fires on all cylinders. I mean, the cast across the board is star-studded. Paul Dano's Riddler is like a straight-up horror movie villain. And through, it's great to see Robert Pattinson's Batman on the case, doing detective work as Batman should be doing in a movie. It is special, and I have to mention Michael Giacchino's score. That is a triumph. This movie's magnificent in my opinion, and it is the best DC film we've seen in a long time. Next, we've got The Flash, a movie that is a big step down from The Batman, unfortunately. The Flash was a huge letdown to me, and many others probably, a lot of you guys will agree out there. The weird thing about this one, that really makes no sense to me, is the fact that the movie had monumental hype months before it ever came out. They screened it at CinemaCon in like April of 2023, and the movie didn't come out till June. And so a bunch of people saw it and were claiming it the best DC film since The Dark Knight, the best comic book film of all time. So we had all built this movie up to be the greatest thing since sliced bread or air conditioning in our heads. And when we went and saw the movie, it was this CGI mess that goes completely off the rails in the third act, making little to no sense. The movie has a lot of promise early on. It brings back Michael Keaton's Batman, and there's this nostalgic feeling to it. He was definitely a scene stealer. But by the end, it lost all of that setup early on, where it was this sort of Back to the Future time travel movie about Barry trying to convince the other Barry to get powers, and then, oh, we gotta save my mom, blah, blah. It was all of this, and it worked, but it just became this mess and this repetitive final act that just became visually nauseating. The Flash, I can't go terribly high with. It's a D tier movie to me. It's not outright F tier. I'm saying right now, in this moment in time, I just put it there, right behind Batman vs. Superman, because I would watch BVS over it simply because of the dialogue between Batman and Superman. There's some really well-written lines there and moments that I remember. The Flash, on the other hand, I tried to erase from my mind after I watched it. And unlike pretty much every other movie on this list, it's the one where, like, the more and more I think about it, the less and less I like it, and that's never, ever a good thing. That being said, let's talk about another DCEU film from this year, Blue Beetle, that came out, like, today, as of this video dropping. I wanted to love this movie so much. Xolo Maridueña is the man in Cobra Kai. He plays Miguel Diaz, and this movie is, like, in that middle ground area for me. It's not outright bad, but it's not outright good. I wanted to love it and I didn't, but I don't hate it. It has a lot of moments that I can pick from and enjoy, whether that is Xolo's performance. I mean, he commits here. His character has so much heart and charisma, you can't help but love him, and his character Jaime Reyes. The family dynamic, especially early on in the movie, really worked for me. And the humor in this film is really hit or miss, but Rudy, played by George Lopez, is the standout. So again, this movie has those elements that really work. The practical effects suit mixed with the CGI, beautiful, like one of the most clean suits I've seen in a superhero film. But then I take a step back and I go, man, it's generic as hell with a plot that is so painfully predictable. It doesn't do anything to really switch up the origin story formula, and it just feels very repetitive by the end, making it almost a stale experience, especially with the main villain plotline. As much as I wanted to love this movie, it does fall pretty flat for me. I would say it's a middle-of-the-road movie right now. I would probably put it in the middle of C tier. Like, I think about Zack Snyder's Justice League and I go, yeah, the movie's overrated, but it's got some great, memorable moments. Blue Beetle doesn't have as much, but I think right now it's a little more entertaining than Aquaman. So, middle of C tier feels fine. That's literally middle of the road, pretty much, a little bit lower tier. Check out my full review linked up above for, like, my full in-depth thoughts on that movie. But yeah, Blue Beetle was a disappointment for me overall, which I wanted to love. Xolo's still the man. Cannot wait to see what he does next, but the movie was just fine to me. Moving on, we've got The Dark Knight Rises. I adore this movie, and if you guys watched me do a ranking of, I forget exactly what it was, I think it was the $1 Billion Club films, I had this in A tier, and I said if it was specifically DC or specifically Batman, this would be S tier, and you're damn right it is. The Dark Knight Rises is going right behind the Batman right now. This movie is phenomenal. It is everything I love about Batman in a film. It's a story of triumph and rising from the ashes, almost overcoming adversity in a way, as Bane literally takes Batman, kills him essentially, throws him in a pit in hell, and says, you know what, come back and fight me if you want to save Gotham. I just gave myself chills. The pit scene, whatever the hell they're chanting when they rise up and he doesn't use the rope. That's one of the most uplifting scenes in movies. I'm not kidding you. If you guys need a boost of energy right now on this Friday, go watch that scene. You'll want to run through a brick wall right into the weekend and conquer anything that life may throw at you. This movie is special. Never understood the hate for it. It's a perfect conclusion to this trilogy, and you're damn right. And in terms of DC movies, S tier for sure. Then we go from that high of The Dark Knight Rises to possibly the lowest low with Batman and Robin. This movie is going at the back of F tier. This movie stinks. I know you can try and meme it. It's so bad that memes are actually above this movie somehow. It's painfully boring, unfunny, unwatchable, and it's overall just a mess of a movie. I rewatched it before The Batman in March of 2022, and good lord was that a chore. I mean, wow, I would have rather taken a standardized test than have to rewatch this movie. It stinks. It stinks. Next, we've got Man of Steel. This is a hot topic when it comes to DC movies. People love it. People hate it. Is it overrated? Is it underrated? I think it's a very good movie. I'm going to put it in the A tier behind Batman Begins. Now, with that being said, I haven't watched this movie in years. I highlight the score every time I talk about it because Hans Zimmer's score is masterful, but I haven't revisited this movie in years, and I think when I do, it could drop for me. I recall it being a very well done origin story, a little on the longer side, but that score carries so much weight for me, and there are such memorable moments with Superman when he takes flight, when he's fighting Zod. Through and through, it's a well-constructed origin story, a little on the darker side and the longer side, but a very good movie that deserves a spot in A tier right now. Again, need to rewatch this one to clarify exactly where it goes, but that might be a telltale, as I haven't had the desire to watch this movie in a long time, so is that me subconsciously thinking it's not all of that? Who's to say, but right now it earns that spot in A tier. Next we've got Wonder Woman. Will Gal Gadot ever come back in the role? Who's to say? There's conflicting reports right now on the internet, but when it comes down to Wonder Woman, I really like this movie. It's near the upper tier, I'd say, for DCEU films, and the No Man's Land scene alone really puts this at least in B tier. I look at what I have left to rank, I go, it's A tier. I'll put it in the back of A tier right now. Look, this movie, again, don't go back and watch it all that much. Third act can get a little crazy, sure, but man, is Diana a badass in this film, plus her relationship with Steve Trevor is explored here, and Chris Pine's charisma is undeniably good in this movie. I think the villain's probably the weak link, but look, it has its really fun moments, its badass moments, and the score, whew. Just like Man of Steel, Wonder Woman's score will get me amped up any day of the week. So I'd say back of A tier feels appropriate right now, teetering on that B line. Next we've got Batman Forever with Val Kilmer, and we've got a Tommy Lee Jones playing Two-Face and Jim Carrey playing the Riddler. This is an F tier movie. I would probably have to put it at the top of F tier because I think it might be more rewatchable than these two films. This movie, on the other hand, is decent at times, but not really. In fact, it is just as unwatchable as the rest of the movies in F tier. Batman, for the longest time, was just getting the short end of the stick theatrically, and I think in the history of the character, like, we're indebted to Christopher Nolan for coming in and changing the narrative of that character for the better, because my God, we had some stinkers for a bit there, didn't we? Staying in the realm of stinkers, this one's going to upset a lot of you guys. Batman Returns. This is the second film with Michael Keaton. You've got Catwoman. You've got Danny DeVito as Penguin. This movie is not good. And I will go D tier, even though, honestly, I remember when I rewatched it, I was like, this movie's really bad. So I don't know if I can go outright F tier, because I do think it's better than Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. Not by much. But I would go back of D tier. I take The Flash over it because I like Keaton's Batman more than that, and I take BVS over it. This movie's really overrated, and I think it's because of nostalgia for a lot of people who grew up when it came out, but the movie's just a bore. Like, frankly, a lot of this movie, hard to resonate with, and it's so stupid. I know there's this campy nature to Batman inherently, especially if you go back to like the 1960s with the show and the movie, which we're going to talk about here in a second, but it's not the kind of Batman that I dig. A bunch of Penguin henchmen running around and Catwoman doing her weird thing. Like, I just never vibed with the Burton Batman films. We'll talk about the other one here in a second. Staying in the realm of Batman for a few more picks here, we've got Batman, the movie from 1966, Shark Repellent, what else? All the one-liners. There's just this endearing feeling about this movie. It's definitely a product of its time, and it resembles that cheesy show, the cheesiest iteration of Batman by far. But it's more watchable than certain iterations of the character, specifically the ones in F tier. Do I think the movie's that good? I don't. But there's some charming nature to it where I go, huh, maybe it's not as bad. Like, this would be a delightful little Sunday afternoon watch if it's raining. Take a trip back in time to experience, like, the origins of Batman on the big screen. And it's, like, fun enough. It knows what it is. It's that self-aware Batman, whereas some of these other films in F tier and D tier, like, try and get too serious for their own good. This might get some heat. I don't really care. I'm gonna put this movie, I'll go right here in D tier, like over The Flash and Batman Returns. I take BVS over it just because I do think it's a little more of an enthralling watch if I had to, you know, pick between the two. Talking about Batman one more time, and then once later in the video, we've got The Dark Knight. This is praised as the highest rated comic book film by a lot of people, the best comic book film, the best Batman film, the best DC film. A lot of those things ring true, but I can't go above the Batman. I'm going right here. It's my runner-up for DC films. What an incredible achievement this is in filmmaking. It, obviously Heath Ledger, rest in peace, he fully committed to the role of Joker, and he created one of the best performances and terrifying iterations of the character we've ever seen. It is an infinitely rewatchable movie. It is clever from start to finish. It's got Christopher Nolan written all over it, and the score by Hans Zimmer, whew, it's so good. Notice how I've talked about him a few times here. The Dark Knight was going to be S tier from the moment I hit record on this video. It's just shy of the Batman. That comes down to personal preference. I am fully aware of that, but I am a huge fan of the Batman, so I go The Dark Knight right behind it, but those three are easily S tier DC films and some of the best Batman films we've ever gotten. Next, we've got Green Lantern, Ryan Reynolds. I laugh at this movie in retrospect because it's the first movie I think I can remember where I was watching it and I paused it and I was like, this movie's so bad, I do not want to finish it. I ended up finishing it, however, but like I was 11 or 12 when I first watched it. It wasn't in theaters, it was on demand or whatever. And so this is an F tier movie. I do think it's more watchable than, this is tough. You know, honestly, I think it's probably, for the memes, it's probably more watchable than these. It's got Ryan Reynolds, so there has to be some charm to it. Plus, it's not just some boring Batman, so I'm putting it over these versions of these films, and I'll go top of F tier. Granted, F tier just stinks, so if anything's in there, it's outright awful, but it's above the others, so I guess that's something positive about Green Lantern. Next, we got Wonder Woman 84, yet another F tier movie. I'll go top of F tier with it over Green Lantern, which I know I just put there, but at least Pedro Pascal's in it, at least there's certain action scenes that are well shot, and at least Chris Pine is in the film. Other than that, it is way too long, lacks any compelling action scenes or villains, and just is a really unnecessary movie. I remember it being marketed as this big action spectacle, and it lacked really any action for the first 70 minutes. The plot takes a turn in the final act. It's utter nonsense, laughably bad. It's an F tier movie, and then on the other end, you've got The Suicide Squad, which is going in S tier. This is at the back of S tier for me, because I think The Dark Knight, you know, and The Dark Knight Rises are special, and The Batman's my favorite Batman movie, but The Suicide Squad is the best DCEU film on this list by far. It excites me that James Gunn is coming in to run this ship in DC. That won't, like, really go into full effect for a few years in terms of him being behind the camera and having, like, full creative control. We kind of have to get through the rest of this year before it becomes, like, a real thing. But nonetheless, this movie rules, and I have to just commend James Gunn for taking the most obscure characters from comics that I haven't heard of, that no one really has been a fan of, and making them the most lovable, easy to root for characters ever. And he does that with the Suicide Squad, he does it in Marvel. He is one of the best comic book film directors, and he proves that here with the Suicide Squad. What a delightful movie that is. Then we've got Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the other DC film that came out this year. I've already talked about the other two. This is a C tier movie. I would put it like behind Aquaman right now, maybe right here above Aquaman. I flip-flop, and honestly, those two switch. It's kind of irrelevant which one's above the other there. I do prefer Blue Beetle over it, which is worth noting, because that makes Blue Beetle the highest-rated DC movie of the year for me. But Shazam! Fury of the Gods was fine. It was overhated upon its release. A lot of people were like, oh, it stinks. It wasn't the best, but it was fun enough. It maintained the tone of the first Shazam. We kind of knew what we were getting into. Didn't really push the boundaries of comic book films, and because of that, it was treated a little harshly, and that's fair because we do live in a world with oversaturation, and Blue Beetle kind of reminded me, all these movies really are the same for the most part, so they gotta be really special to stand out nowadays. Shout out Across the Spider-Verse and Guardians 3 for actually doing that, but Shazam! Fury of the Gods was fine. Next we've got Batman 89. I know I haven't touched that B tier yet, and honestly, I'm not going to right now, because I think this movie is really overrated. Obviously, I respect Jack Nicholson's performance. I love Michael Keaton in the role, but I've never been crazy about the Burton Batmans. Never have. I do think this is at least C tier. I would put it relatively high, maybe right here. Right behind the Justice League cut. At least this movie gives us the iconic Danny Elfman score. It is Michael Keaton's Batman, so, you know, there's this cool nature seeing him as Bruce Wayne and Batman. He's one of the better iterations of the character. But this movie's just too cheesy for me. I like Batman to be a little more serious, and Jack Nicholson's Joker is dancing around a prince at times, cracking these cheesy one-liners, and it's just a little too campy for me. Then we got Black Adam. This movie's F tier. How bad an F tier? I think it's a little more watchable than everything else there right now, but what a massive letdown this was, especially with The Rock hyping it up, being like, oh, the hierarchy of power of the DC is about to change, and then just completely fumbled the bag with this movie that is like non-stop action, headache-inducing to a point. The plot is paper thin, and the character, Black Adam, really had no charisma or likability, so this movie was really hard to connect with or care about anyone involved. It's a stinker for me, and definitely going in F tier. It's an exhausting watch. But then we've got Joker. Joker is a fantastic movie. I would go A tier with it. I wouldn't go S tier. It's a really well-made movie. It's the most Oscar-nominated film out of any others on this list, I want to say. And I would put it pretty high in A tier. I'd actually go the top of A tier. It's, again, great film. Just shy of S tier for me right now. The reason being is I just don't go back to it as much as the film's in S tier. Again, this is my personal preference in terms of ranking it. And as great as Joker is, I mean, Joaquin won the Oscar, rightfully so. Movie's dark as hell, makes me feel dirty and disgusted inside when I watch it, so it succeeds at its job, but it's a haunting movie, especially that score, which did also win the Oscar. It's a great, great movie. Really curious to see what they do with Joker. Folie à deux, however you say that. It's Joker 2, the musical, pretty much. However, it's an A-tier movie, and it's damn near S. Next, we got the first Shazam, the first B-tier movie. This movie's delightful. It is a fun little coming-of-age story that was a nice change of pace for DC at the time. They were making these darker films, and this was a venture into a sort of lighthearted family story that really worked for me. I thought the cast all around brought it, and it's a fun movie. I like how it pokes fun at a lot of the stupid tropes in the superhero genre, like when Shazam's facing off against the main villain and he can't hear him because they're like a mile away when the villain's giving his big monologue. Always got a chuckle out of me, so B tier it is. Then we have 2016 Suicide Squad, which is an abysmal movie. I have the opportunity to do something special here, and I'm gonna do it. It's going at the back of F tier, making it the worst DC film on this list. I walked out of the theater sick to my stomach with how disappointed I was. The trailers and marketing sold me fully. It was going to be such a cool superhero film at the time. The villains are like this squad, and it's this anti-hero movie. Stinker of a movie. I honestly don't even want to sit here and talk about it because of how grossed out it makes me feel that this movie exists. Thank God we got the James Gunn film to right the wrongs of this abomination. And last but not least is Birds of Prey. This is going in B tier. I'd go above Shazam right now. I do enjoy the movie quite a bit. I think Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie, match made in heaven. She is so perfect as that character. The breakfast sandwich in this movie looks delectable. And all around, it's cool to see this unique twist on a DC character where it's not told chronologically. That's one of my favorite things. We as the audience sort of put the pieces of the puzzle together along the way. Pulp Fiction-esque in a way, very Tarantino vibes at times. It's got action, smart dialogue. Black Mask is played by Ewan McGregor, and he eats it right up. So all around, this is a very fun, R-rated DC entry and a very enjoyable flick. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my ranking of all the DC live-action movies that I've seen. And if you want to see me talk about DC animated films eventually, I'll do that. I just didn't want to mix the two in this specific tier list. But be sure to hit that like button, comment down below your favorite and least favorite DC films, as well as what tier you would have put them in. Where would Blue Beetle land? Let me know that down below. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to help me reach my goal of 85,000 subscribers here on the channel. It will mean a lot. But that's gonna do it. Stay tuned for my reacting to your DC hot takes video dropping tomorrow. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.